Welcome to the program today. Maldo Gonzalez here in studio with Ken Johnson. I want to remind everybody a couple things before we get going here. Also remind you of our upcoming Orlando Prophecy Summit in Orlando, Florida, March 2nd through 5th of 2023. You can find more information about that at prophecywatchers.com. Scroll down, you can see the banner there. Again, lots of stuff going on, and again, exciting times. Speaking about exciting times, Ken, welcome.
Thank you.
We have... in the sense of exciting times, you are a man on a mission as it relates to times and seasons. For those in our audience, give a little bit of background about where people can find information about you, and again, I think what you have created, the Dead Sea Scroll calendar online. Kind of give the average person who doesn't know anything kind of some background.
Okay, well, I've been a Christian for a long time. I've studied the early church, and the last 3 or 4 years studied intensely the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it's kind of important because it gives a lot of history that we don't know about. It really answers a lot of questions. And I'm at BibleFacts.org is my main site. I also created DSSCalendar.org when we finally figured out the Dead Sea Scroll calendar. Basically, I wrote the calendar in PHP, so when you go to it, it takes your the exact date, Gregorian date, and the time zone you're in, and then kind of recreates from the Gregorian calendar the Dead Sea Scroll calendar.
Does it like grab it off of their computer, like their little clock? Is that how, they don't need to input anything, it automatically tells them what it is?
Right.
Yeah, awesome. So I know there's a lot of confusion. I know I get emails all the time about the Jewish calendar. There's two things. Give us a background on really what you see, the two basics of the Jewish calendar right now, which are, in the sense of the modern Jewish calendar, and then the Dead Sea Scroll calendar that you guys have been working, the Essene calendar. Kind of give us a summary of the two different calendars.
Okay, well, they're based on the Bible calendar. The Bible calendar is that the year basically starts in Nisan. The 14th of Nisan is Passover, always has been. So the difference is, when do you start the year? And so on the modern Jewish calendar, it would start the full moon, the new moon closest to the spring equinox. And this would create a 354-day calendar, which means every 3 or 4 years you need a leap month. And that just seems very way off. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls talk about originally it was a solar calendar, and going to a lunar calendar was predicted. It's what the apostate Jews did in the 2nd century BC. So that's their story anyway. You and I weren't there, so we don't know.
Yeah, no, it's good to be humble.
But it's nice to see the actual prophecies in the history, and it actually makes sense. But what they would do is the same thing. So the 14th of Nisan is Passover. It's the same calendar. But again, when do you start it? And since it's a lunar calendar, or solar calendar rather, it's all based on the spring equinox. And they keep the weeks even. So like if I was to ask you, our New Year's is January 1st. That's our New Year's. So if I was to say, what day does New Year's fall on? You'd say, well, it all depends. It's different every year. Well, they keep the years or the weeks straight. So it's always on a Wednesday when they start theirs. So it's nice. Tuesday's always Passover and that kind of stuff. And it is really nice because when you go through the New Testament or the Old Testament, and Moses did something or Jesus did something, and then 3 days later this happened. There's no fillers in the Bible. So when it says 3 days later, you're supposed to know 1, 2, 3. That would be the 14th of this month. That's on a Tuesday. That's next to I know what's going on. And it's really easy, and you learn a lot of stuff that way. But basically, that's the main difference. So once every 5 to 6 years, there is a leap week, and it keeps everything in sync.
I think, what is the modern, if you go to Israel today, go to Jerusalem, is it like 5782 or something like that is the...
Yes.
So
the years are off.
So they have 5782, but that's quite far from...
Yeah, 167 years difference.
Yeah, where does that mistake come from? Well, they wouldn't call it a mistake, but in the sense, we're coming up on the 6,000th year, even for some of them. Where does that discrepancy originate?
It actually originates in the 1st century with a rabbi named Yoshi. And we actually have comments in the history of this in the Talmud and in the Seder Olam. And basically what had happened, the Seder Olam is an interesting book. It's a guy about 160 AD that decided to put together, kind of like I did with ancient post-flood history. We get Genesis, we tally up the numbers, we go to Kings, we tally up the numbers, plug in church fathers, or they plugged in rabbis. So he goes through and he builds a case for this is the year. And he gets to Daniel 9 and says, well, we all know Messiah came and it fulfilled the prophecy. But what happened is, and he begins to respectfully say, there was a rabbi named Yoshi that wanted to get rid of the fact too many people were converting to this false Messiah. And so he came up with the idea that the Persian period is not 210 years or whatever it is, it's actually 20. And he came up with this theory that Artaxerxes, Darius, and Ahasuerus were all the same guy.
Okay.
They're just titles. And of course that got thrown out because it messes too many things up. Well, he comes up with yet another theory, another story, and it gets thrown out. But then about 2 centuries later, somehow the dates are fixed. So with the Hillel calendar.
Today, with a lot of Israeli scholars, no doubt, are involved in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Obviously, what is their perspective? I mean, they have their calendar; they obviously live by it. What's their perspective as it relates to the Essene calendar and its differences? Do they give it much credibility?
Yeah, most of them would agree. I mean, there's been a lot of study on the calendars, just like from the Seder and other books. And so the dates are all the same. The dates, for creation would be 39, 24, 25, whatever it is. So everybody tends to agree that the modern Jewish calendar, years-wise, is off. But they've consistently said it would be too much trouble to try to change it. Because number one, they all go by the Gregorian calendar anyway to pay bills and work with other nations.
Yeah.
So there's no sense in muddying the waters. But a lot of them are saying, maybe it wasn't really put into play. Others are agreeing that there's something wrong. And the Dead Sea Scrolls in general are causing a lot of Jews to say, well, I'm not sure about Christianity, but I can tell I've been lied to somewhere along the line. And it's really making him think. And the Messianic community is growing like crazy.
Yeah. It seemed would seem that at least I'm asking, the modern Hasidic movement, which again reflects a lot of the religious groups in Israel proper, I imagine that they probably don't prefer to read much of the Dead Sea Scrolls, or am I wrong on that? Only because of its kind of anti-Pharisaical, ideas in the sense of like what we've discussed before?
Yes and no. God's got them in a catch-22.
Yeah.
The problem is you've got Palestinians that say, you don't belong here, this is our land, get out. And their main argument is, apparently we do, this is our ancestors' writing, we were here. Well, if that's true, why don't you read and follow directions from what your ancestors said? So it's like, well, I have this proves I'm here, now don't look too close at it.
Yeah.
Not that it's fake, but the
content, it really is a strike against what we'd understand as modern Pharisaical, even just modern rabbinism, right?
Right. Yeah. They specifically talk about, the scrolls talk about the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The Sadducees are the seekers of smooth things. They don't believe anything, just do what the government says, go along with the flow. And the Pharisees were kind of warlike at the time, and they called them the sons of darkness. Probably one reason is because they followed the lunar calendar rather than the solar one. But that's not a big deal per se, but they had a lot of other problems. And it's just like those blanket, idiots over there. So there's these terms that they came out with. So they were very, very much, you know what I believe, I know what you believe. If you want to talk about it, you come see me, I can lead you to the Messiah. But otherwise, we're not working together.
Yeah. It's amazing when you think about the calendars, and here we are, in 2022. So there's been a lot of discussion over the past, really, I would say at least 5 to 10 years, as it relates to the calendars. Especially, give us a summary. Again, what I hear from people that write in is, in the sense of the two different calendars, we talked a little bit about it, but there's been a lot of discussion on the Shemitah and the Jubilee, and you kind of have, it seems to be, you have two different perspectives today within maybe the Hebrew roots movement or whatever. Kind of talk about the confusion and why that people are leaning where they are. I mean, the sense of the timing, like 2022 versus 2025.
Okay, well, one thing is the way they do the calendar. The Dead Sea Scroll calendar is that you have a Shemitah, Like we have 10 decades in a century. They have 7 Shemitahs, which would be 49 years, and then you have a Jubilee year. Then it starts over again.
Full 50.
So, yes. So 1 century is exactly 2 Jubilees. The modern Pharisee way of doing it is that the Jubilee year is in one of the Shemitahs. So in other words, 2 full Jubilees would be 98 years instead of that. So that puts the time off. So they have a count as starting at a certain thing just in sets of 7. And the Dead Sea Scroll calendar is like basically sets of 50. And so that makes a difference. What's interesting about it is we've got one Dead Sea Scroll, like 11Q13, that says Messiah is supposed to come and die for our sins and start the age of grace. And the event occurs 1 Shemitah after the end of the 9th Jubilee of the 8th Una. So when you look at that calendar, if you do it the Dead Sea Scroll way, sets of 50, it comes out to be 32 AD is when Messiah came to die for our sins. If you do it the other way, it's many years back.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me, they were known by Josephus and others to be 100% accurate prophets. And so far the scrolls are accurate if you keep the right calendar.
So right now, I mean, in the sense that you probably hear this, is that I don't know, a couple of years ago, certain people are talking about, hey, the final Shemitah is coming. That's going to come in 2022, which here we are in, late, and end of the year 2022. So according to that particular group, the calendar, I know that I heard perspectives that the tribulation was going to begin at least by the fall of 2022 and be the last 7 years to 2029. Well, we're kind of in that now, but that would seem to maybe discount some of their thinking, where we're coming up on 2025. Why is 2025 important?
Well, the Dead Sea Scroll calendar makes the year 6000 to be 2075. And if everything was right and we're looking at it right, that should be the start of the millennium. 7 years back would be the tribulation start, and then it goes further back. And you can't set dates on this because it's just a general, it's the end of an age for sure. You can put that down to the day. But when you look back, you just have to look back at the earlier ages. Abraham was supposed to come and destroy the Nimrod Empire. Okay, and all that's date. We got a lot of dates of all that kind of stuff from the scrolls. But basically, it started about 50 years before the end of the age and went another 120 some years. So it's like a time period when everything happened. So Messiah was born in 2 BC, if the calendar's right, died in 32, church age starts in 32, Jerusalem temple destroyed in 70, Essene temple 73, end of the age 75. Then you got the Bar Kokhba stuff, 130 to 135, and then finally everything's over. So it's like a coming is a series of events that start way before and maybe go way after. So same thing, we have a tribulation period and a second coming and a rapture before that. That could be 2067 to 2075. But we're told the days are cut short. And what if the beginning of the millennium is 2075, but he lets us build the temple complex or part of it. So the second coming could be quite a bit before.
So you wrote a book, the Ancient Dead Sea Scroll Calendar, and the prophecies that it reveals. Kind of give us a summary, this is a prophecy update, but give us a little summary of what you did there and then how that connects with the what you do online, or the opportunity for people to check things out online.
Well, the Dead Sea Scroll calendar site, dsscalendar.org, what we wanted to do is say, here's how the calendar works, and here's the date and everything. And since they break it up in 500-year periods called unas, there should be 14 of those in the 7,000 years. So we made little charts of the 500-year periods, and we did it the way they do it. So it's like one line is a Shemitah. It's year 1 to 7, 8 to 14, and then a Jubilee year, so about 5. And then we have all these. And then what we wanted to do is take dates from the Dead Sea Scrolls, Church Fathers, Bible, anywhere, plug them into that so we can see it. So you look at dates, even on an AM calendar or BCAD, and they don't seem to match any patterns, but there's all sorts of patterns on the other one. So like, for instance, Paul tells us the tribulation period, right in the middle, is when the temple is desecrated, right? So if you back up to the middle of the last 7-year period of the last age, it was the destruction of the Jerusalem temple. And that's kind of interesting. So if you back up one more to the end of the first age, it was the exact date of the fall of the Tower of Babel. So it's false religious systems trying to be godly that fall. So it's an interesting, and you would never notice that by looking at a BC date.
Yep.
So it's an interesting thing. So it's something we can put together and we can study on.
Yeah, awesome. Ken, appreciate your time. Ken Johnson, BibleFacts.org. Here we are discussing dates and seasons, which is exactly what Paul tells us in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, that we are to be awake, we are to be watching. That's one of our favorite verses here, Mark 13:37, that in the midst of all of Jesus' descriptions of the end of the age, he says, what I say to you, I say to everybody, to be watching. And that's exactly what we want to do here. So appreciate you watching today. Also, always ask for your prayers. We know that apart from Jesus, he says we can do nothing. And so we want to be very close to him at all times and sharing the good news of Jesus Christ, that he is coming soon, and that the only way to be protected from the coming tribulation period is to be found in him. And so appreciate you watching today. And again, BibleFacts.org. Check it out.